Hello to all my fellow World Wide Web surfers. My name is Steve Persh, Director of Developer Experience at Pantheon. Today, I want to address one of the scariest developer experiences handling security updates. After all, it is the spooky Halloween season. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And if that wasn't enough reason to talk about security updates, we also had a critical security update come out just last month for Drupal core. In a few minutes, I'll unpack why I put air quotes around the word critical there. It does have a specific meaning. This past update was a 16 on the 25-point scale used by the Drupal community for security releases. Not all security updates are equally concerning. This past one was nowhere near as scary as the so-called Drupal-geddon update of 2014. That one was a 25 out of 25. It was very scary. It was about as scary of a security update as it gets. But even the 25 out of 25 Drupal-geddon was a bit dramatically named. It was not. It was not the end of Drupal, not by a long shot. Uh, the Drupal community for that release had a few days of a heads up. We knew something big was coming and that we'd all need to apply patches to our websites ASAP. That day back in the fall of 2014 came, the big patch came, and as is the case with a lot of security updates, there seems to be an inverse relationship between the scariness of the security hole and the size of the fix. That 2014 security fix was a single line. It was one additional function call, one single line that needed to properly escape database interactions. And the same day that security release came out, well, the hackers got to work. Platforms like Pantheon, though I wasn't an employee back then, started detecting systemic attacks to Drupal websites the same day. That security release, more than any other, prompted me to start paying closer attention to how these things work. Now is normally the time in the live stream when I'd bring in a guest. But today I'm going to try flying solo on the stream, drop a message into the chat, ask any questions, heckle if you want it. It can always be more fun with some interactions. I'm doing today's stream partly because I just wanted to try it out solo after nearly a year of streaming with guests, but also because I do have some inside knowledge to share here. I should emphasize the word some knowledge. I wouldn't describe myself as a website security expert, but I've seen some things. Let me bring in my screen share, and we'll talk about the most recent Drupal core security update. So for much of the Drupal community, the entry point into this security release was seeing the security advisory. Many of us know that, okay, these things happen on Wednesdays. I get email notifications about security advisories. You might just see it in the dashboard of your Drupal site. You might get a notification through some other community channel. But one way or another, you become aware, oh, wow, there is a Drupal core or perhaps a WordPress core security update. If you do not regularly pay attention to these kinds of notifications, this information here can be difficult to parse, but perhaps what stands out is scary words like vulnerability, cache poisoning, critical in big bold letters, enough to scare to put some amount of fear, maybe too much fear, maybe not enough fear into you. And when this happens, it is okay. It is generally a good idea to go ahead and apply an update. So I'll jump over to another dashboard tab here on Pantheon and show what does this look like for Pantheon customers. Here I have a demo site. This is a site that's out there on the internet, but no real domain name is connected to it. This was a purely a demonstration site that I made. I can see back in Q2 of 2023. So this was a site that I spun up before this security release came out, and I did not do a whole lot with this site. Apparently, I did not do anything with this site or nearly anything with this site in the months since I created it. So this is a site that does not have this security update applied. Uh, and what we need to do here in order to get this site patched and covered at the Drupal level is apply updates. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check that button. And I see this as a significant improvement over the status quo that I was dealing with back in 2014 when I was not a Pantheon employee, when I only had a fraction of sites on Pantheon. It could be a stark difference in terms of what it looked like to apply a security update or really apply any update. Applying any update can be a challenge. While this update runs, I'm going to bring in one of my crayon and Lego diagrams. If you've watched the stream before, you know how much I love these diagrams. So we'll let this update run here in the dev environment of my site. I'll bring this off, and I just want to talk about how does this update get out to the live site, to the live environment on a Pantheon site. So we were just there in the dev environment. We applied our update in dev, and in the Pantheon dashboard, as soon as that update is applied in dev, we can move that update to test and to the live environment. Now, I said a challenge that many web teams have in getting security updates out the door is it can be difficult just to move anything to your live environment. A common shorthand in the DevOps community is 15 minutes. It should take no more than 15 minutes to get any given code change from a pull request or whatever your starting point is. Perhaps just a button in the Pantheon dashboard like we were seeing. No more than 15 minutes from, okay, we do want this code change to go out to the live environment, to getting it all the way to the live environment. If it takes too long to get any given code change out to your live environment, you're going to be less likely to do it. And that can lead some teams to not apply security updates quite as frequently as they should. That can lead some teams to ignoring all sorts of updates. And the more you ignore updates, the less frequently you use your deployment pipeline. Whatever it is, the slower that deployment pipeline is likely going to get. Now, if I bring in my screen share here again, hooray, I've now updated my version of Drupal core in this dev environment. And if I want to, I can then move that code change out to the test environment and the live environment and so on. So, and I might as well go ahead and do so. So I'll say moving security update to test. What's happening under the hood here is we're taking our Git repository for this site, for any site, and when we do a deployment from the dev environment to the test environment, or the test environment to the live environment, a Git tag is being made under the hood. So, okay, cool. I'm feeling a little less nervous now that my demonstration site here has this code fix. Now, one of the reasons I'm comfortable showing a site that does not have this security update fully applied, one of the reasons I'm comfortable showing that on a live screen share on the internet is I don't think I'm going to get hacked dangerously here for a few reasons. And let me now go back to the details of this security advisory. As I mentioned, these advisories can be scary, and it probably is best to err on the side of caution and just get your updates applied and out the door. But if we parse this a little bit more closely, I get a few reasons to not be quite so scared. So some of the things that stand out to me in this security advisory report is that, well, it could be worse. When I first heard about this particular exploit, I assumed it would be scoring higher. And we'll talk about the details of this scoring system, but this is a 16 out of 25. So could be better, could be worse. I also see here that this is specific to Drupal's JSON API. So if you are not using Drupal JSON API at all, you could you probably don't have that module turned on, or if you do have it turned on but you're not using it, you could mitigate that vulnerability just by turning the module off by uninstalling it. So like, okay, that's good. That's perhaps one reason to make you worry a little bit less. I do see we do have a chat coming in, a question about Drupal 7 support. So I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a second here. One more reason why I'm not all that concerned about showing an unpatched site is that this particular vulnerability can be mitigated at the edge layer. So we have our Drupal application, and we can, on Pantheon, we do have a web application firewall configuration that lives inside of our CDN. I do want to diagram out how that works, but let me answer this Drupal 7 question as well. So you work with a company that has a diamond account at Pantheon, many Drupal 7 sites. Drupal 7 support is scheduled to stop in terms of official community support. Will Pantheon still support Drupal 7 sites? Or should or should we work on migrating these Drupal 7 sites to Drupal 10? The short and easy answer is yeah, of course. Switch to Drupal 10. Drupal 10 is better. It's more modern. Plenty of reasons to upgrade to Drupal 10. There's a counterpoint though that migrating from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, 9, or 10 is a large effort, and depending on the site in question, it may not be worthwhile to expend that effort. The effort of switching from Drupal 7 to Drupal 10 might be on par with the effort you expended building the Drupal 7 site in the first place. And for that reason and others, Pantheon, we intend to run Drupal 7 sites as long as we can. We still run Drupal 6 sites. The Drupal community does have conventions for providing support for versions after they go officially end of life. End of life can be a scary term, and similar to these security vulnerabilities, it is probably best to err on the side of caution. But Drupal 8 is end of life. There's still Drupal 8 sites out there. Drupal 9 is about to be officially end of life, but there's still Drupal 9 sites that will continue to exist in the world. So that may not be as clean of an answer as you're hoping for. I do think it will be healthy for the Drupal community if more of those Drupal 7 sites can move on to Drupal 10 or even something else. In some of the conversations I had with Drupal community members back at the last DrupalCon North America, some Drupal community leaders have the mindset of those Drupal 7 sites don't necessarily need to move to Drupal 10 or a modern version of Drupal. They may be better off moving to WordPress, Backdrop, anything other than staying forever in perpetuity on a version of Drupal that will have decreasing levels of support over time. If you do want more guidance than that, I do recommend reaching out to your point of contact with your Diamond account, and we can have a follow-up and deeper conversation. But I am glad you asked about Drupal 7, because I do have it on my outline here to show a Drupal 7 vulnerability that I was partially responsible for generating in a Drupal 7 module. All right, so I was mentioning here that there are characteristics of this vulnerability here in Drupal core, Drupal 8, Drupal 9, Drupal 10 that give me cause for concern, and some things that make me less concerned. So I mean, the main reason, again, that I'm comfortable showing this in a live demo is that Pantheon did mitigate this vulnerability at the edge. So let me jump back over to that diagram primarily. I'm going to switch out the diagram here and add we're going to do a very high level talk through of the elements in play here. So we have our CMS, we have our Drupal site, and we have what is called a CD and content delivery network. So our content management system, Drupal in this case, is the thing that is responsible for generating web pages. If a person is browsing the internet, comes across your website, they're going to send a request. The CDN, the content delivery network, may be where your domain name is pointed, but that CDN knows that this request for example.com or whatever it is needs to be satisfied by Drupal. If you're asking for the homepage or whatever site it is on example.com, Drupal prepares the HTML for example.com, sends it back to this person. And when Drupal sends that response back out this way, it probably is attaching metadata. It should be attaching metadata in most cases that indicate that this page prepared for this orange person here is actually usable, is actually serviceable for anyone who visits. If it's the home page for the public, there's a good chance that when the request is made from our orange person here, there's a good chance that when Drupal responds, it's telling the CDN this version of the homepage is actually usable for any person in the public who comes in the next however many seconds or however many minutes, hours, days. Give them the same version. So when that orange person gets their response, the CDN here, the content delivery network, hangs on to a copy of the response so that it can then respond even faster to everyone else who asks for the homepage. That makes your website overall much more scalable, and it makes these responses so much faster. This round trip from our original requester of the homepage is probably going to take hundreds, if not thousands of milliseconds. And still, that's probably not the slowest part of a website. If we're talking website performance, the JavaScript and the images that load are probably where more of your performance problem is going to happen. But still, it is good for website performance, good for website security, and a bunch of other things if your CDN can cache that response. All right, I feel like I might be drifting too far afield from our security advisory here. Bringing it back to the security advisory, I just wanted to bring to mind some of the characteristics here. What is happening with the security release that came out last month is that with the restrictions of with JSON API, with JSON API using error back tracing, with certain configurations, if we have a malicious person, I'll make our red Lego guy here be the malicious person. A malicious person could carefully construct a URL such that someone who is logged into the website, let's imagine our orange person here is logged into the website. Our malicious hacker sends a specially crafted URL to the orange administrator of our website. Drupal sees that the orange person is requesting a page or a URL really to be served by JSON API. It returns an error, and because of code that wasn't fully thought through, caches at the CDN, even though it really shouldn't be caching at the CDN. The person in orange may not even notice that anything weird is happening. They may just see an error and be partially confused by it. But our red person can then request the same page and get the session information from the orange administrator that they should not be getting. So that, again, is something that we can and did mitigate here at this CDN level. This is also something that of course, was mitigated at the code level. If we take a look at the relevant code change here that fix this inside of Drupal core, again, this was an issue of cache poisoning. So our red hacker is tricking this whole system into caching information that never should have been cached in the first place. So the way that gets mitigated is by telling here the JSON API module, if we're handling an exception, if we're handling an error, and we're logging. Uh, don't cache that. That is not something that probably ever should have been cacheable. And so here, the cache max age is getting set to 0, and cache tags are being considered more appropriately. Okay, so good. I don't know about you, but I feel I feel less stress. I feel uh, less anxiety around these security releases when I have some understanding of how it is that they're working. So again, this was a 16 out of 25 in Drupal's security scoring system. And to understand that security scoring system, let's go back to our advisory. And again, this section here, if you're not familiar with it, I find this just difficult to parse. 16/25 AC colon complex slash A. So there is a logic here. If we click this link, we'll bring up the security risk levels. So the Drupal community here is building on an existing convention here, and what we're scoring on is different metrics, like how complex or how simple is it to access this vulnerability? Is there authentication needed, and whatnot? And so what we can do is map this particular advisory to this scoring rubric and get a number. So this particular security advisory scored a 16 out of 25. And we can put that together by asking, how difficult is it for the attacker to leverage this vulnerability? And in this case, AC, or access complexity, was labeled as complex, meaning we're only going to add 1 point. And the more points we add, the worse the security vulnerability is. We'd be adding 4 points if it were none, meaning there was no complexity at all, if it was very simple. But in this case, it was a particularly complex path of attacking. It requires tricking that administrator into clicking a particular link. It's a lot of moving pieces in order to successfully exploit this particular attack, and we'll touch more on that, on the implications of that in the exploit category. Now, do we need authentication here? Here we're going to score higher. Here we're going to score 4 points because this security vulnerability did not require the attacker to be logged in. The attacker needed to trick someone who was logged in, but they the attacker, does not need to be logged in to exploit this vulnerability. Does this vulnerability cause non-public data to be accessible? Here we see CI was categorized as all, as in, yes, if someone did successfully exploit this this path, they would potentially get access to all non-public data. So again, we're going to score pretty high there. So we're already up to 10 on our 25-point scale. What are we going to get for these next 3 categories? Can this exploit allow system data to be compromised? Is it going to be all of the data, some of the data, none of the data? Here we're going to add 3 points because it's only some of the data that that would be modified or deleted if someone successfully followed this path. And I keep saying if somebody successfully followed this path. And that brings us to this this next scoring. This was a theoretical exploit. What this scoring indicates here is that this was not being used to hack websites before it was reported here. Now, I should say that even though Pantheon is part of the Drupal Steward program, and that gives us some visibility into the handling of security issues, I have no special information there as to this particular scoring. This tells me this labeling of theoretical here tells me that this was not getting uh, found. In fact, this was reported by user Ghost C Cam. I didn't even notice that. That seems very appropriate for. I'm calling this a Halloween cybersecurity awareness month. Seems appropriate that username Ghost Cam Alex Brown is the person who reported this. This tells me Alex is a security consultant. Makes sense. Security consultants often look through code for things that may produce insecurities. So, hooray! This was, it seems, a white hat in security parlance discovery. This was not someone maliciously using this. And then finally, what percentage of users are affected by this? It is not all users because JSON API is an optional module. You don't have to have JSON API, but apparently it is a default or common module configuration. And that demo site that I was just showing, this is a demonstration site that I had made specifically to show off decoupled or headless configurations of Drupal in conjunction with Pantheon's front-end sites offering. So it's a module that does get used. So again, I'm very happy that we could mitigate this vulnerability at the CDN level for all of our customers. Still a good idea to apply security updates, if for no other reason to make those red messages go away, telling you that you have unapplied security updates. So, all right, we have scored our scorecard. Let me bring this a little bit bigger. We scored 1 on access complexity, meaning it's a pretty complex thing to attack. It's unlikely for anyone to just stumble upon this vulnerability. It doesn't require any authentication, so it scores high there. It does make non-public data accessible, so we're already up to 10 points. Can this exploit allow system data to be compromised? Some. 3. Does an exploit exist? No, this is theoretical, and it's only some users. So that gets us to a scoring of 16 out of 25. And again, bringing us back to this scoring system, a 16 out of 25 is going to be considered critical. 20 to 25 gets us to highly critical. Less critical and moderately critical are below that. All right. I'm going to pause there, check the chat to see if any more questions are coming in. Again, feel free to add any questions you may have. Yes, so please do follow up on Drupal 7. All right, so I feel less scared by this vulnerability, knowing what it is that makes this a 16 out of 25. Critical is critical. This is something to be concerned about. But knowing exactly what makes it critical, knowing what can and has been done to mitigate it, makes me less scared. And I'll even go so far as to say I feel a little less scared even when we max out all of these characteristics, believe it or not. Let's compare this last Drupal core security advisory to the one that came 9 years ago in October of 2014. The worst of the worst. This was a 25 out of 25. This was a security release that closed an SQL injection vulnerability. So let's let's follow how this one scored. And it may be helpful as well to gain some understanding into what specifically was happening in this security vulnerability. So again, I mentioned that the scary ones seem to have surprisingly small fixes. So this was a MySQL vulnerability that was closed by adding a single function call. Okay, what that's seems a little bit odd for a for each loop that is presumably taking an array to have to call array values before looping on it. What was wrong with this code? Array values, this PHP function, as I understand it, will have the end result of stripping out really the keys that were passed in to this data variable and just give us numeric keys. Why does that make a difference? Well, it makes a difference if someone maliciously can put an SQL injection into the key of the array. So what we see here is the test that was written. It's it's often illuminating to see, not just what code fixed the vulnerability, but what test verifies that the vulnerability that was present before is not present after. So the vulnerability that was present before is that you could do a classic MySQL injection, close with a semicolon, a MySQL statement, and then, just start a whole other uh, MySQL statement that does something malicious. And with MySQL injections, you can do some pretty scary things. So let's see how this one scored. Again, it was 25 out of 25. It was as bad as it gets. Let's understand a little bit more of why. How difficult is it for the attacker to leverage this vulnerability? This one was scored as not difficult at all, meaning, and that, this is showing up a little too small. Let me bring this back over here. So this one was scored as not difficult at all. If you hit a vulnerable Drupal site with a carefully crafted URL, that was all it took to do the MySQL injection. So it was a 4 out of 4 on access complexity. Authentication, it didn't require you to be authenticated in order to exploit this vulnerability. No authentication. Does this vulnerability cause non-public data to be accessible? Yes, if you're doing MySQL injection, giving yourself an administrative user account via MySQL injection, then yeah, you can access all of the data in that site. Can this exploit allow system data to be compromised? Yeah, again, with a MySQL injection, you could presumably delete all of the content. You could make yourself an administrative account and sign into the website and modify. Scary stuff. Does a known exploit exist? The scoring of this one, again, knowing that it's the maximum in all cases, apparently this one was out there in the world getting exploited even before the security advisory came out. What percentage of users are affected? Basically every single Drupal 7 site in the world was affected by this and vulnerable. So this was maxing out all of the risk calculator categories. Very scary stuff. And still something about the action of understanding how this vulnerability came to be or was mitigated makes me feel less anxiety than I did before. That was a scary day back in 2014. But because the site that I personally cared about most was running on Pantheon, mitigating that vulnerability for sites on Pantheon was as simple as clicking this button and moving the code changes out to dev test live. You could respond pretty quickly if you were running on Pantheon. Bringing it back to that diagram that I was showing before, if your deployment pipeline is something that you are not exercising frequently, if you are only doing deployments to your live environment, back in 2014, there were plenty of teams that only did deployments to the live environment a few times a year. And that means a stressful deployment, like the application of this security fix, is going to greatly increase your stress level. Now, again, this was this was a situation where it is helpful to have, even these two layers of separation. This is an immensely simplified diagram of a website architecture or of what Pantheon does. But on that day in 2014, when all of these Drupal administrators are working to fix their CMS, I'll make the red guy our villain again here. Um, Pantheon as a company could put a fix inside the CDN, because even though this was a 25 out of 25 Drupalgeddon event, it was something that platform providers could mitigate here at this CDN level, and then look at our logs and see like, oh yeah, there really are hackers out in the world who are trying to attack these sites. But because we've mitigated it at the CDN level, in addition to making the application of updates as easy as pressing a button here, we're double covered in terms of protecting these websites. Seeing that all play out makes me more comfortable, more confident uh, as a web developer, knowing what strategies are available uh, to mitigate these kinds of attacks. Um, this was back in the Drupal 7 era, and before I move on to demoing one more Drupal 7 vulnerability, I do just want to touch on that word Drupalgeddon. That is just the word people started using when this 25 out of 25 update came out, but I've heard pushback on that term over the years. Shout out to Tim Plunkett, who I remember in particular say that word was not helpful, because that word made it sound much worse than it actually was. Like, yes, it was a 25 out of 25, but Drupalgeddon as a word makes it sound like, oh, Drupal is over. No, Drupal was not over. You apply the one-line update to your CMS, and if you have a well-exercised deployment pipeline, you should be able to do that relatively quickly. And if you have a separate layer like a CDN on Pantheon or Acquia or Platform SH or just one you're configuring on your own, you can put another mitigation there. And it is not the end of the world. It is not the end of your website. Yes, there are sites out there that did not apply the update, that did not have a CDN in front of them, that did get hacked, but still, even there, the mitigation is restore a backup. It's not the end of the world. It's not an Armageddon level event. All right. Before we go, I do just want to show one more particular security vulnerability that I was more involved in. So this is a vulnerability that was present in Workbench moderation. Workbench moderation was a module, is a module still for Drupal 7 that was written by my coworkers at Palantir.net. As I joined Palantir back in 2011, this module was about to get released, and a few years later, someone discovered a security vulnerability. And let me demonstrate the basic idea here. So first, the basic idea of Workbench moderation is that you can take an article. I'll call this another test article. And in addition to the normal Drupal core concepts of a thing being published or unpublished with Workbench moderation, you can have additional moderation states. Draft needs review. If you want other moderation states, you can have those too. So I'll save this in a draft state. I'll foreshadow here that to make the security vulnerability even more obvious, I have artificially slowed down this site. As I commonly do on this live stream, I like to add these PHP sleep functions to make a website artificially slower, so that it's easier to see the way these things can break. All right, so again, the basic idea here is that we can move this piece of content between draft states, and critical to the security vulnerability that we're about to see, we can have an additional unpublished draft or needs review version of our article, a version of our node that's not published, and it's the term we used colloquially was a forward draft, meaning a new draft. And I'll call this sensitive draft. It could be the case that the unpublished draft that is supposed to be ahead of the published draft contains sensitive data. So again, I've artificially slowed down this site, which I regret a little bit here as I wait the extra seconds for this save to fully process. But that artificial slowdown will help me illustrate how this goes bad in just a bit here while I set up the conditions in which unpublished material could be exposed in a way that you don't want. So far, we are seeing the intended usage of this module, although I've, again, artificially slowed down the processing of these database interactions. So we have a published version, and we have an unpublished draft that is ahead of our published draft. The way this can go bad is when we save the forward draft, there is a brief moment in which that forward draft is present in the node table, meaning present in the table of the database table of content that is meant to be read when a member of the public comes to the website and wants to see the content. So here I'm minimizing one browser window. I've got another browser window where I'm not logged in to this site, and I can see a test article. This is the version that I was working on yesterday, prepping for this live stream, and I have another test article. So it is good that right now I am not seeing test article hyphen sensitive draft. But what if I edit the sensitive draft and save it, and while the saving is happening, what if I do a bunch of refreshes of the logged out window? Oh, we see a brief moment there where it disappears. So that's weird. Our second article has disappeared from public view, and there it came back. So what we are seeing there is a brief moment where this article just disappeared from public view. It's disappearing from public view because there is a moment in time that I'm expanding by adding these sleep commands saying sleep for 10 seconds, but a moment in time in which, from the perspective of the public, Article 2 does not exist, because the version of Article 2 that is in the main table of content. I'm realizing that sounds like table of contents, and I suppose that fits. The version that is in the table meant to be viewed by the public is an unpublished draft. It does not have the flag of published set to 1. It has that flag set to 0. Now, so we saw on the homepage that article just completely disappeared. Part of the reason this bug, or depending on how you look at it, security vulnerability got reported is that because when you're loading the individual page for this article, and I'll just keep adding exclamation points to emphasize how sensitive this draft is. Loading an individual page here, if I hit refresh as my saving processes, there'll come a moment in time where this page seemingly disappears. Oh, actually, there comes a moment in time where I see sensitive draft. Depending on your configuration, and we'll see that in the security scoring for this version, depending on your configuration, if you've given a user role the ability to view unpublished content, and that's is a permission you should not just be handing out willy-nilly. Uh, Either a member of the public or a user role that is not meant to see this sensitive draft will see this sensitive draft. Now, enough seconds here have passed with that sleep command that the not sensitive published version is back when I hit refresh. But this behavior can go even worse if we are caching. So I've turned off page caching here, but this vulnerability or this bug uh, has even more adverse effects when, to go to my diagram here, if our orange person is the one saving content in the CMS, they're logged in. If our purple person here asks for that article page in the seconds or milliseconds in which our unpublished draft is present in the table of contents, they're either going to get the sensitive version depending on the configuration, or they'll just get a 403 error, meaning like they don't have access to read this article. And that is the situation that caused this to get reported, because a very large website was getting built using this module, a website that, because it was large, because it had lots of data, because it had lots of modules, had slower load times. So it did not require the addition of these 10-second sleep functions. It was just the case that in usage of this site, in the testing of the site before it went live, there were situations in which one person would be editing the article, another person is requesting the articles, and the CDN is loading the article state where either it's a 403 or it's visible depending on the configuration. And because they're using caching outside of Drupal, that caching system is holding on to the improper state. So this was a more complex bug. This is something that was more properly fixed in Drupal 8. Myself and the other maintainers of Workbench moderation, we knew it was hacky, for lack of a better word, to do that switching of um, revisions inside of the node table, but there simply was no other way absent hacking Drupal core itself. And so we put a fix into core itself for Drupal 8. So the remediation here, when this finally became a publicly disclosed security advisory, the remediation was basically, let me bring up the appropriate tab here. The remediation was to install a newer version of Workbench moderation, a new branch that used a more robust method for doing that juggling of revisions. Now, I see we're running out of time here, but this was categorized as moderately critical. I won't go through the full scoring here, but it was, mitigated by the fact that this was theoretical. Like, this was not something that was actively getting exploited. It was a fairly complex set of conditions that needed to be present for this bug or depending on your configuration, security vulnerability to occur. And that's how it was, many years of high usage of Workbench moderation before someone noticed it. All right. Seeing that we are at time here, I feel like I should be wrapping us up here. Much of what you've seen here today, really, I think everything you've seen here today, you can replicate on Pantheon for free. If you head over to our website, pantheon.io/register, you can create a free account. You can try out that dev test live environments. You can do what I did here and install I think more than 10-year-old version of a Drupal 7 module in order to get the security vulnerability available. But again, my hope is that if you do that exploring how do these vulnerabilities work? How hard are they to recreate? Like, I knew this workbench moderation vulnerability existed. I was involved in remediating it, and still, it took me more time than I expected yesterday to bring about the exact conditions that would let me demonstrate it here. So that makes me feel a little bit better, knowing that even when you know that there is a vulnerability there, crafting the path by which to exploit it does take a serious amount of work. And again, on a platform like Pantheon, we're mitigating many of these threats at the CDN level. We mitigate a ton of threats just by the nature of our dev test live deployment pipelines. So many security vulnerabilities or paths of attack, especially in the WordPress ecosystem, happen by virtue of assuming that the live environment has a writable file system. Because uh, if WordPress can rewrite itself, and one of the reasons you might want it to rewrite itself is to immediately apply updates in the live environment, well, you could maliciously trick uh, a PHP application to rewrite itself to produce spam links or anything else you wouldn't want to see. So that again is also something you can test out by signing up for Pantheon for free. The test environment and the live environment have lockdown file permissions, such that the only way to change code in test and live is through the Git-based deployment pipeline. All right, we're at time here. Thanks so much for joining the stream, and I'll see you on the internet. Bye, everybody.